Hey, this is Pastor Matt here at Fellowship Baptist Church, and I want to ask you a question. Have you ever hated seeing someone get blessed by God? Or have you ever been angry that someone was forgiven by God because of maybe the ways they've hurt others or they've hurt you? It's made you angry. That's where we find Jonah. After all Jonah had gone through of trying to flee from God to avoid preaching to those he hated, after being tossed overboard and thinking it's over, and then being swallowed by a great fish and crying out to God in the midst of that, and then being spit up on the shore, and finally going and preaching to the very people he did not want to preach to, but he did it in obedience to God. We find Jonah here in chapter 4, and we find that he has finally preached to these Ninevite people, those that he hated. And then God, in his amazing mercy, forgives these people. They cry out to him in repentance, and he offers them forgiveness. And it's an amazing reminder because the Ninevite people were very ruthless and cruel people that went to far lengths to humiliate others and those that they conquered especially. We find in this, and it's a good reminder that God forgives the worst of us, and that is awesome. But we find that Jonah had preached to them, and then Jonah, in his anger, he points at God, almost like he's pointing in God's face, and he almost yells at God, saying, "I knew you would do this. I knew you would. I knew you would forgive those people because you're compassionate and you're merciful. I knew it." And then we see Jonah do something amazing. It's crazy, but we're in Jonah chapter 4, verse 5. I want to read this to you. "Then Jonah went out from the city, and he sat east of it. And there he made a shelter for himself and sat under it in the shade until he could see what would happen in the city." You see, Jonah's anger and hatred had blinded him to the needs of others. And even more, he was blind to what God was doing. You see, in this city was, depending on how you look at this, but 120,000 plus, new believers, people that had just learned about God and began believing in him. Jonah, as a prophet of God, should have been in that city preaching and teaching the word, encouraging these new believers, helping them understand what God would have them do, helping them understand the commands of God. What we find is his anger, his hatred blinded him to the needs of those and blinded him to what God was doing. And I want to ask you, is that you today? Have you yourself set yourself against what God is doing? Have you stopped wanting to be a part of what God is doing because of your hatred against someone? Or maybe someone has made you angry, and so you've put yourself on the sidelines and not been a part of what God is doing, not wanting to see that. You see, Jonah was offered great mercy, but he didn't think others deserved that same mercy. I encourage you today, ask God to help give you a compassion for other people. Ask him to help you see the needs of others, to look around and see that, not to sit on the side anymore and just watch, but be a part of what God is doing.